I'm excited tonight that you guys are here. We're having a domestic violence awareness meeting tonight. My name is Kathy Kreitler, and I'm the chairperson of the Domestic Violence Division of the Community Services Forum. The Community Service Forum has been just celebrating their 30 years in existence since 1993. It was formed with the flood to meet the needs of our community. We have the resource guide. I wanted everybody to know that this is available at your local, like the health department, the extension center, places like that, and it's also online under ste.gen.cares, St. Gen Cares, and you can access resources for the community and state and federal resources. So tonight we're going to talk about domestic violence, which is a really hard topic to talk about. These ladies here, I'm really excited. We have a great panel for you guys. I'm going to turn it over to Misty McElliott. She's a 30-year resident of St. Genevieve. She has a bachelor's degree in international affairs and with an emphasis on cultural affairs. Yeah. So she's going to introduce you to our panel, and I think you guys will learn a lot. There's one thing with domestic violence that I really wanted everybody to know. It's not the big brute that's beating up on the smaller person. It's more of a power thing where if you love someone, you trust them, and that makes you vulnerable, and the person who's abusing is wanting power and control over that person. So it's not a brute that loses his temper, it's more of a calculated manipulation. So they're going to talk about that today and give you some insight on that. So I'm really excited. We've got a great crew. So Misty, I'm going to hand it over to you if you want to do introductions, and I look forward to the conversation. Thank you.
I'd first like to introduce Holly Porter, MA. And can you please help us, can you tell us how you help domestic violence survivors in your role as director from A Safe Place in Jefferson County?
Yes, so at A Safe Place, we are a small domestic violence shelter in Jefferson County. We are able to serve 5 ladies and their kiddos for emergency shelter. We offer community resources, court advocacy, help with restraining orders, and I kind of oversee that program and the services that we offer to victims in Jefferson and surrounding counties.
Thank you. Next, I'd like to introduce Taylor Reed, BA. Can you tell us how you help domestic violence survivors in your role as community advocate at A Safe Place in Jefferson County?
Yeah, so I'm a community advocate, so I work part-time at A Safe Place in Jefferson County, and then I'm also stationed at the Jefferson County Sheriff's Office, where I can reach out to the community, to victims in the community, and also help them with restraining orders and push reports.
Thank you. Finally, Brett Stevens, can you tell us a little about your roles of being the administrator of New Vision, the assistant chairperson of Resources to Recovery, and a domestic violence survivor?
Yes, so my position as administrator over New Vision Withdrawal Management, I assist people with beginning their recovery from substance abuse. So that is my role there. My role in as assistant chairperson, vice chairperson of Resources to Recovery is to really be able to, it's a coalition, so we can connect people with different resources, and when different individuals are going through a situation, that we can best connect them and help. I am also a domestic violence survivor. I went through many years of domestic violence and have been free from that for almost 10 years now.
All right, next we'd like to start a round of questions. For Brett, tell us about domestic violence. What is it, and what forms or types does it look like?
So I don't think that there necessarily is a type, like just to be able to look at someone, just from sharing from like a lived experience point of view. Mine was, he was a very clean cut. He was military. He was a college basketball player. And, you know, I didn't recognize, and I've honestly thought about it quite a bit. I still don't see the red flags for quite some time.
So one of the things we look at with domestic violence as far as forms and types is financial abuse, so controlling the money, disallowing their victim from having access to the family funds, spending money on themselves, sometimes even going as far as limiting like how much food you can purchase for the house and what money is available to pay bills. We look at there's a form of abuse, spiritual or religious abuse, where that abuser would use the belief system against their victim. So they're telling them, you know, you can't go to the church, they're not going to help you. God says you have to be a submissive wife and you have to do as I say, and kind of using that to pit their religion against them in a sense. We also have sexual abuse as part of intimate partner violence or domestic abuse. Many people don't think that that's a thing within a marriage, but coerced sex is not voluntary sex, and it is a form of abuse. So, you know, if you're intimate with me or you have sex with me, then I'll be nice to you. That's abusive behavior. So it's not just physical. It's all of those things kind of wrapped into one, and it's not very often that we see a victim that has only one type or form of that abuse. Most often it's a blend of all of those. And then of course comes the emotional and psychological abuse where, you know, I look like a clean-cut good guy, like everybody else that sees me thinks I'm great, like there's no problem with me. Meanwhile, we're living a very different experience, right? With this person who he's not acting with his victim like he is with everybody else. And that's a big psychological game. Yeah.
Thank you. Next, for Holly, how would you address a victim of domestic violence who believes the abuse is their fault?
So I think that's a pretty common thing that we hear among victims is, I must have done something to deserve this. And I think sometimes even people will ask a victim, well, you know, what did you do to set him off? Or what did you do to make him or that person angry? I think the first and most important thing to say to a victim is, it's not your fault. You've not done anything to deserve any kind of abuse. It's important to be supportive with them and make them feel empowered. So we want to honor the choices that they make and trust that they're telling the truth and let them know, I believe what you're saying to me. And then really help them to feel empowered to make their own decisions. So we don't want to force decisions on them. We don't want to lecture them and say, listen, you need to leave, this is a bad relationship, you're in danger. We want to kind of talk them through that, but let them make their own choices along the way. Because the bottom line is, they're the expert in their life, and they know their abuser better than we do. So if I were to come in and say, you need to leave, you're not safe, but you know he's pretty serious about doing physical harm to you, if she would then listen to me and run out the door and leave, she's putting herself in more danger. So we really want to honor that person's experience and trust that they know what they're talking about and give them that autonomy and that empowerment to make those decisions on their own. And we want to make sure that we're connecting them with resources that are going to keep them safe. So the most important thing to say to an abuse victim who's attempting to leave or is sharing their experiences that, one, that you believe in them, and two, that you're there to support them in their choices, not necessarily what you think they should do.
Next, for Brett and Holly, why don't they leave and why do they often return?
I personally, like I said, it took years before he began the abuse. It was a very slow process. As Holly had mentioned, I was slow, and I can look back and see things like I didn't have access to money. I didn't get to spend time with my family. It was just a very slow process. But also, you know, after the actual physical abuse, that's when, in my mind, I'm like, I gotta get out of here. But I tried after the first couple times of leaving, he kind of knew me enough that he knew when I would get ready to leave, he knew. And so he would also start a lot of manipulation as far as taking the car keys. telling me that nobody else would ever want me. How are you going to take care of the kids? Down to how do you know what is in your vehicle when you pull out of the driveway? There was so much, and then why would I return? I look at that. They're so very, very good at the manipulation, and he knew that the thing that I put to the utmost importance was the white picket fence, the all-American dream, the mom, the dad, the kids, the white picket fence, you know, and I will be good, I promise. I'm so sorry. I love you so much. So he very much knew how to build me up and tear me down, but he knew when to do what.
I think asking why someone stays, and just kind of listening to that just kind of calls to mind that there's a process there. So abuse doesn't start very overt and plain to the world, right? It starts with the smaller things like breaking down your confidence, making sure that you don't feel like you're capable and that you can handle yourself, or that other people find you offensive or lacking in some way. And so it starts out where, you know, they're breaking down your sort of natural defenses and your confidence. And so, and that's a slow process. And oftentimes by the time you kind of realize what's happening, your self-esteem and your confidence is already so dented that now you're just kind of unable to see yourself any other way. And so leaving at that point really, oftentimes I think isn't really a consideration, because you just don't think you can do it. How are you going to survive without that person to take care of you when clearly you can't do anything on your own, right?
And I also remember, like, the leaving became a part of the cycle, because I knew that he would be really sweet to me if I would just leave for a couple of days.
Yeah,
And that's what I wanted so bad.
it becomes a tool for survival.
Yeah, it did.
If I leave for a couple of days, one, I get some peace and quiet.
Oh, yeah.
I get some quiet, I get some rest, and then when I come back, he's going to be really nice to
Yeah,
me
for a little while.
for a little while until that
And then
cycle
when he
starts
starts
over.
again, then I'll just go.
Yeah, that's a good explanation.
Yeah, that's great, thank you. All right, next again for Brett and Holly. How do you know if your relationship is abusive? What are the warning signs of an abusive relationship? I think we pretty much covered a lot of that. Is there anything else you guys would like to elaborate on?
No, I think we covered it pretty well.
Okay. All right, then moving on. For Holly, can men be victims of domestic violence, and are there safe houses or resources for men?
Yeah, so studies have shown that about 1 in 7 men report as victims of domestic violence. That's an estimate, because what we're finding is men aren't too quick to call and ask for help for domestic violence. So it's probably a really underreported number. I have heard from male victims that calling into a hotline for help is often intimidating. They're met with a female advocate, because it's pretty much a female-run industry, right? They're met with a female advocate who I've heard reports of being, you know, kind of laughed at or asked, well, what did you do to deserve? Like, what did you do to her? You know, she smacked you. Well, what did you say or do to her? But men can be victims of abuse. They can be victims of isolation, manipulation, control, just like a woman can. And yes, they can be victims of physical violence. You know, culturally, our men are taught, most men are taught, don't put your hands on a woman. They're brought up to learn that, you know, we don't hit women. We're not violent with men. So, you know, if their partner, if a woman is being abusive with them, oftentimes they will back off and not fight back. And there's also the knowledge that when the police are called, the police are probably going to come in and look at that male who may be twice the size of, you know, the woman who's hitting him, and automatically think that he's not a victim, he's the one who's instigating it. We also know that men can be victims of sexual violence and abuse. Again, pretty underreported, because most men aren't going to want to come and admit that they're being sexually abused or assaulted, but, you know, it is a thing, it does happen. There are some resources out there for men, not many, to be honest. There is a shelter in Cape Girardeau that has a room set aside for male victims of domestic violence. There are therapists around where they can get some mental health assistance, and the National Domestic Violence Hotline, which is on the screen behind me, has a lot of resources for men who are looking for help, and can be met with a compassionate person on the other end of the line that will give them that information.
Great. Thank you. All right. Moving on to Taylor. What resources are there for domestic violence victims?
A lot. You can get anything from legal services to counseling to food, shelter, housing. When I'm out there at the sheriff's office, and sometimes we have a court advocate out there as well, we help out with restraining orders and helping to get into contact with police to make reports. So there's a variety of stuff, and there's probably you ask for something, we can probably find 2 or 3 right off the bat.
Okay. Thank you. Was there anybody that wanted to add to that or any additional? Okay. All right. And again, back to Taylor. How does a restraining order work, and will it protect me?
So a restraining order takes a little bit of work. It is some paperwork. It is a lot of writing on a piece of paper of what happened. Why do you feel like you need a restraining order? Are you in fear for your safety? So when you fill that out, it's sometimes hard for victims of domestic violence because writing it out may feel like they're reliving it, and so it may take a while, but it's so worth it because you write down all that information, you go to court, you explain to the judge what's going on, and then when you do get a full order, it's put in place to protect you. Yes, not saying and it is a piece of paper. It doesn't mean that something might not happen, but with a restraining order, you're able to contact the police, make reports, have a paper trail, have those police, if that person is still there, to be arrested, to have some consequences for that violation right there. So a lot of people say, oh, it's just a piece of paper, it's not going to do anything. They can do a little bit more than nothing. So I always try and push those if they are good for their safety.
Thank you. And back to Taylor. I am ready to leave an abusive relationship. What do I do?
Number one thing, whenever I contact victims or they contact me and they're like, I don't know what to do, I want to get out, I always talk about first thing first, like, are you in a safe place? Do we need to get you to a safe environment where then we can continue services? Because, you don't want that abuser in the same room listening to everything or to find things if we hand you resources or anything like that. So first thing first is safety planning, especially if they're still in the house with the abuser. We want to make sure that they have a safe way out, they have some place to go, that they have, support. And then from there on, if we work on them, we want to make sure that they're okay. So we get into those counseling, we get into those support groups. If they need shelter, shelters will offer all of that as well. So I think the beginning of getting out of, an abusive relationship is kind of building that person up to make sure that they're confident leaving that situation. And like Holly said, making those decisions themselves.
It's also really important to plan leaving. So when people call to the shelter and talk to us, we talk through safety planning and how do I leave. So we're looking at things like having backup documentation. So you want to have copies of your social security cards, your birth certificates, and there's some amazing things that are out right now as far as you can get a free copy of your birth certificate for you and your kiddos if you're a victim of domestic violence. So it takes away the financial hardship for getting those things. So having your all of your important paperwork maybe stored in a friend's house or some kind of safe location with a go bag with maybe a couple of changes of clothes, a pack of diapers if you have little ones, and a can of formula, and kind of quietly preparing those things so that when you do leave, especially if you have to leave suddenly, that you have some of that backup, and then you've got a head start on putting your life back together because you have all of that important paperwork and documents. We also talk about pets. It's a big thing with abuse victims. They hesitate to leave because of what about my dog? What about my cat? And abusers will use that. That's part of that manipulation and control is, well, if you leave me, I'm going to kill your pet. And that's intimidation. That's keeping you there through coercion. So, making plans for where is that pet going to go, who can foster, and there's programs out there that will foster animals for domestic violence victims. Gathering keepsakes. If you have family photos in the house, maybe making some copies of those without getting caught, and secreting those away into a go bag so that you're not tempted to go back because my picture of my grandma is the only one I have left, and it's hanging on the wall in the living room, and I really want it, and then they go back and put themselves in danger for keepsakes. So kind of quietly gathering those things together and storing them in a safe location so that when you do choose to leave, you have the things that are most important and useful to you. So I think that's a really often forgot about part of planning to safely leave. Yeah.
Thank you. All right, and I believe we're finished. Do you guys have anything you'd like to add that maybe we've kind of passed over? All right. Well, thank you, guys.
You're not getting out of here that easy. Hi, everybody. I'm going to wrestle these girls down and have a conversation. Okay, so let's say that somebody's at home and they are in a situation and they're not comfortable, they feel like they're in an abusive situation. What should they do? Like if you're at home and you just don't feel comfortable, you feel like you're being pushed down and being held back from who you are. You feel like you're being verbally abused, not physically, but just they're not letting you live the life that you want to live. Like you don't have access to money, or they're not letting you around your family. You can't go out with your friends anymore.
Yeah.
If they're keeping you down, like they don't like the clothes that you wear, they don't like the way you wear your hair, things like that.
And criticism.
Yeah, a lot of criticism, and you can't do anything right, and you don't like the relationship, but you don't know how to get out because, say you're living together, how do you get the money to get an apartment for yourself? They won't let you with your friends anymore, and you're not close to your girlfriends anymore. Nobody would take you into their apartment. I mean, what do I do? Because I can't get away from them. What should I do?
I think the best advice I can give is to reach out to one of these hotline numbers where an advocate can kind of walk you through. Everybody's next steps are going to be different. So really reaching out to those professionals and being brave enough to tell them your story, give them the ins and outs and kind of what you're going through and what you're thinking, and let them reassure you that you're not in the wrong, that you're brave for speaking out, and that there is help out there for you. Whether that's through entry into a shelter where there are advocates there to help you get your finances in order and gather resources, or it's you're going to find time to research it quietly or have a friend research it for you. I think that the most important thing is just reaching out to those resources to get that information, and knowing that you're not crazy and you're not wrong.
Yeah. So they'll give me resources, so I'll still stay in the situation I'm in until I have connections to get out. But they'll help me network to find people and resources to set up so that when it is time to leave, when I have all my ducks in a row, let's say, then I can get out that way. And then when I do get out, there'll be supports for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's a lot of support out there. I think that leaving is one of the more dangerous times in an abusive relationship because your partner is going to realize that they're losing control, and that's the thing they want the most. So this is a power imbalance, right? They want to be in control. They want to know that things are going the way they want them to go, and when you take that away from them, they're going to react. So it's one of the most difficult times in that relationship, and probably one of the most dangerous. So it's going to take some careful planning. Surely there are circumstances where running in the middle of the night without planning is absolutely warranted, and that goes back to that victim is the expert in her own life. She knows what her abuser is capable of, and that's where we empower them to make that decision. That's their decision to make. But when you get to the point where you're actually going to take that step out that front door, and you're out, you're done, then that's when, you know, professionals can step in and help you with resources, and really, you know, help you build up your self-esteem and empower you to take those next steps and know that you're doing it with support. There's a lot of support out there. There's a lot of us women out there that are fighting for victims to have a chance and to regrow their confidence and be successful.
So what I'm hearing from you is I can do it afraid.
Yes, you can
So go ahead and step out,
Yes.
and there are people that will catch me if I call like the national hotline, and then they would connect me. When I call a hotline, they're just going to want information on me. They're not going to want my abuser's number, or they don't report to the police that I call.
No, so hotlines are confidential. We don't report that information in. We will often ask for your first name so we can address you by your given name, but we don't, it's confidential. We may ask what area you're in so we can connect you with resources in your area. We're going to collect some very basic information, but any of these hotline numbers you call are confidential. The National Domestic Violence Hotline is sort of a central hub, so you can call them, give them your location, and they will pull resources from your area, or tell them what location you would rather be in. Maybe you want to go states away and get away from this person. They can pull those resources in from that state and tell, or city or town, and tell you. Our hotline at A Safe Place is staffed 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Our advocates are always willing to answer questions, provide resources. You know, we have other shelters that we're networked with. And so, yes, it's all kept confidential, and we're going to ask you some bare bones information, and then we're going to get you connected to the help that you need.
Okay, so once I get connected, then they will help me. I'll be supported. I don't have to worry about being left in a lurch and what am I going to do and where am I going to stay? You know, how am I going to get a job or employ myself? Or because I feel like as a domestic violence victim, if I step out and I have nothing, I have no employment, I have no money, I have no house, you know, what do I do? They're going to catch me. They're going to be able to help me find those things, especially if I would go to a shelter. You know, they would be able to pick me up.
But I'll tell you from personal experience, and I left and returned numerous times, more times than I can count. Every time I went to the shelter, except for one time I had to go back. Other than that, we went with nothing. I think there are multiple times we didn't even have shoes on our feet. And there I show up with 3 kids. And every single time, the shelter had diapers, clothes, socks, and they said, get some rest, we'll talk in the morning, and they took it from there and really helped me get reestablished.
Here's what we know about leaving an abusive relationship and going back is that it takes about 7 times on average to successfully leave a violent or abusive relationship. Those of us who work in the industry know that. So when we see someone come back for the third time, we're going to welcome them with open arms, and we're not going to look at that as a failure. It's not a failure unless you make it a failure. Like, we can look at that situation and say, okay, what did we learn this time? Because you've come out of it with more information, more experience. And advocates know that, you know, when you leave us maybe for the 3rd time, you left with more information than you had the 2nd time you were with us. So we know we're giving you a little bit more each time, and we're building you up to that point where you can successfully walk away for good. And that's good advice for someone who has a friend or loved one that they're watching go through this pattern. Because this feeds into the isolation from an abuser, right? Because your family and your friends get tired of seeing you go back to what they can see is unhealthy and wrong. And they can't handle it, so they step away, and now you really are
I can't
alone.
let you go through this anymore.
Exactly, and now you really are alone. So the best advice to give to family members and friends is be that consistent person that sticks with it through those 7. And keep in mind, 7's an average, right? So there's on either
It
side.
sounds low.
It
sounds
does.
low.
It does. There's people that do it on the first try, and there's people that 20 tries later, they're still trying to figure it out. But if you're that person that is consistent with them and understands that they are working through a process and they are learning little bits as they go, and you're there to empower them and support them through that, then you're giving them the best help that you can get. So it's being consistent and staying around while they're working through that process.
One way that I like to explain the going back and forth and going back and why do they stay and all that is everybody has their favorite seat in the living room. Don't you have your favorite seat? And even though it's kind of broke down, you can tell what the favorite seat is when you walk in the living room. It's kind of broke down and smashed in. That's where you're comfortable. Even though it's broke down and smashed in, it's not the best. That's where you're comfortable. And that's kind of like that relationship. Even though it's better to sit on the nice side of the couch, you go to the side you're comfortable with.
Yeah.
So that's kind of why they keep going back to where they're comfortable, even though it's not the best. That's why they go there.
And isn't fear a powerful motivator? You know, fear of change. Like nobody likes change. Change is scary. Even leaving an abuser that you know you're not happy and you know you're not being treated well, but fear of what's on the outside of that can often, fear of the unknown can paralyze you. Yeah.
And what is the perfect thing that I can say to fix this?
To fix fear.
To fix it, like the whole situation. Like I would sit and rack my brain and almost obsess on it, thinking, what could I say or what could I do to make him be nice to me again?
Yeah. And there's not really anything.
No,
Yeah.
there's not.
Because here's the thing, and it's going back to that very first question, the abuse is not your fault. It's something within that person. You've done nothing to cause the abuse. You've done nothing to continue it. It's not your fault. You didn't bring it on yourself. If you would have acted better, dressed better, whatever. We're all in control of our own behaviors and emotions and thoughts, right? And so if your abuser can behave himself at Christmas dinner with his family, if he can go to work every day and behave himself or herself with co-workers, if they can go to the store and have pleasant exchanges with the gas station attendant, then they can do the same with you, but they're choosing not to. So we have to learn to shift that responsibility on that abuser and off of the victim. So we want, especially when we're working with survivors, we want to avoid the victim shaming and blaming and put that responsibility where it belongs, on the person who is in control of their behaviors and actions.
It's like the question they ask, why does she keep going back? You can flip that and say, why do they keep letting him do that? It could be her. Why do they let her keep doing that to him?
Yeah, it's a much
Why do
different
they say it? Why does she keep going back? Why don't they say, why do they let him keep doing that to her?
Well, I remember mine went to an anger management class once. That was like the first time we got in trouble. And the lady that taught the class told him, well, he was just the most passive person that she'd ever met after 3 hours. And she just couldn't understand what the problem was.
Yeah.
So that very much fed into. But I have asked other domestic violence victims and survivors, you know, and not necessarily asked, but there's a common thing that happens in their eyes before they hit you. And this is just my experience. There's a switch in their eyes. I could have given him $1 million. So here's $1 million. Just don't hit me, and he still would hit me. Because there's a switch, and I can't even describe it really, but there's a change in the eyes every single time.
When you talk about the hitting, people think of abuse, domestic violence as the black guy and the beat up woman. But I always say when somebody hits you, you can get a bruise on your arm, okay? And you can say, this is how bad I was hurt. And you have the bruise. And you don't have to do anything and the bruise will go away. It'll be healed. But with psychological, emotional, that type of abuse, it affects your self-esteem and your mind. And there's no way to measure that. There's no way to say this is how bad it was hurt. But you know that you've been hurt. And there's no way that heals on its own. It just doesn't. The only way to heal that is to lay it out on the table and to look at it and to see how it affected you, acknowledge it and deal with it, and then you just file it back. And then it's taken care of. But until you do that, it's going to stay there and it's going to haunt you. That's kind of like what PTSD is. And it will bother you, and until you deal with it, until you lay it out and say, these are the parts of it, this is what I dealt with. You know, by definition, that's what trauma is. When something happens that you can't deal with, that your mind just kind of shocks and holds it. And that's what PTSD is. And whenever you have like a memory, it could be a smell. You know, memory comes back as a reaction to when it's a trauma. It doesn't come back as like a picture in your brain. It comes back as a reaction. So whenever you deal with it, when you lay it out, then you can deal with it, and then it doesn't come back as a reaction anymore because you dealt with it. So,
Well, and also, you know, part of my personal experience too was there were limited times that he ever hit me in my face. I think maybe once or twice he ever hit me in my face. The majority of the time, it was someplace that couldn't be seen, and the back of the head was his favorite spot. And those are places, so when I started to try to fight back with the restraining orders, with charges, with filing charges, with all, like people that knew him were like, there's no way that happened. I never saw a bruise on her mom.
And that touches back on that, they are in control of what they're doing.
Yeah,
If they
you're
know
absolutely
enough
correct.
in the middle of being so angry that they are out of control according to them, they're still being careful enough not to smack you in the face and give you a black eye. They're getting wear, you know, sleeves and shorts. That shows a level of control and awareness of what they're doing, which is just another good indicator that it's not your fault. It's nothing you did.
and I'm thinking too, it's not really the hitting, it's not the physical violence so much, it's the control. You know, it's like it keeps escalating and escalating. You know, like they start with the emotional, and then they just keep escalating until it gets physical, because as you keep healing and you keep moving forward, they keep escalating until it does get violent. So that's one of the reasons that I wanted to have this event now, is to catch things when it gets small with emotional. Like when they insult your outfit, or they tell you that your hair doesn't look right, or they say, why did you comment like that? That comment, you know, it didn't look good when you said that. You sounded stupid, you know, or something like that. If you can catch it early, you know, and just say, you know, stand up and just say that, you know, that wasn't nice, or I didn't sound stupid. You know, if you can catch those red flags, is what they call them.
Yeah.
When they kind of say things that are odd, that challenge your self-esteem, you know, if you can catch on to those and realize what's happening, what you can do is see a counselor. You can talk to a friend, you can talk to a counselor, you can talk to your religious leader, like a priest or a pastor, things like that, and identify what's going on and tell them what's happening and tell them how you feel. Because if it hits you in your gut as it hurt you, or it didn't feel right when they make that comment, that's called a red flag. So if you get that red flag and take it to someone that you trust and talk to them, then you can get ahead of it before it escalates and keeps moving up.
Well, and as a society, and you know, Rome wasn't built in a day, obviously, and as a society, if we make it more socially acceptable to report, to reach out, to make it known that it's actually the cool thing to do, to reach out, you know, like.
And you know, and I see that a lot too. So with the clients I work with and everything, even when they're out of the situation, like, you know, like they've got restraining orders, they've made police reports, that psychological and that mental abuse is still continuing.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I'm constantly like, okay, let's make a paper trail, you know, let's make harassment reports, violation reports, let's take pictures, screenshots, you know, keep all of this evidence, because it is so hard for people, yeah, like you guys were talking about, it is so hard for people to be like, oh, well, you know, this doesn't look like, you know, abuse because, you know, you don't have any bruises or anything like that. And especially with technology today, it is so hard to actually, like, see that stuff, you know, like people hack into your phone, your laptop, you know, put GPSs in your cars, you know, and they can delete information, they can get information. It is so hard for some of these people, and it's just, it's unbelievable for some of these cases.
So I do have a question about, you know, if somebody doesn't have a telephone and they can only use public resources, is there a website or something that they can go to that could get them in contact if they don't have, because we don't have payphones anymore?
The hotline, if they go to the hotline. And when you go on that website, they have, when you first get on it, there'll be a pop-up. And it'll tell you that if you need to get off this website, there's an X. And the X is on the top right-hand side, and you just hit the X and it'll take you off that website. So if somebody's like behind you or something, and there's another website, domestic violence, I'll pull it up on my phone, but it will give you an app. It'll give you an app that, let's see.
Well, she's looking that up. There, like if you have a cell phone, there are apps out there. I'll leave some resources you like used to share with your community. But there are apps out there where it looks like a news app. So you can have it pulled up on your phone and looking through domestic violence, contact information, resources. And some of them you shake your phone, some of them you just tap one button, it flips over to a news article. And it looks like you're just catching up on current events.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, there's a list of really good apps for cell phones where you can kind of, even if he's in the same room with you,
Right.
You can look up information without putting yourself at risk. That's great.
And a lot of resources have things called shoe cards, which is really nice. You know, if you are going somewhere, if you do get information, the shoe cards are really small, but they're full of information, but they're easy to hide. You know, slip into your shoes, slip into, you know, closet, whatever. So those are really good too.
This website is domesticshelters.org, and if you go to it, turn this up, please. That's the, I don't know what Charlie can get that. But if you go to this website, when you first get on it, they'll offer you an icon, and you can pick which icon you want, and you can put it on your phone. And then you just tap that icon and it'll take you to their website, and it's full of all kinds of articles and memes and information and hotlines, and it's just a wealth of information. So you can pick your own icon and put it on your phone, and you just tap the button and you're right there to the resource. So we've talked about quite a bit, but we have more time.
I feel like maybe it would be useful to go over some more, we kind of touched on in the beginning about what the signs are. Like we started talking about red flags here and then, and kind of how sneaky it is. It made me think of like, they call it love bombing.
Oh, yeah.
So when you meet someone and on date number 2, they're talking about how beautiful you are and how bad, and they just, like they're already using the love word. We're looking at relationships where it's a brand new dating relationship. Maybe you've been together a couple, 2-3 weeks, and that person's already talking about let's move in together. That's a big red flag. Yeah, that right away just wanting to jump in and be very intense with the relationship, wanting you to spend all of your time with them, not because they're being mean, but because they just love you so much. You're just so much fun to be around. They have to have you around 24/7, and they just don't want to share you with anybody else. And that's a very flattering thing to hear from your partner. You know, that I'm so special and beautiful that this person just can't just let me out of their sight. They just need me with them all the time. And that kind of draws you in and gets you really attached to that feeling of belonging and being someone who is valuable to that person. So when we talk about kind of those red flag behaviors and people looking at, you know, why do they stay? Well, you get drawn in with those behaviors that really are things that make you kind of fall in love with that person. Those are all great things, being complimented and loved like that. And it makes you hope throughout the relationship that first person you met will make a reappearance. And that's why when you leave, when I say I'll be good and you go back, it's because they're acting like that first person that you met and fell in love with. And so it's easy to trick yourself into thinking that, well, I don't know, maybe they had a bad month. They were stressed out and they didn't really need to act like that. And I remember this fantastic person that I first met that gave me all these compliments and gifts and you know, clearly loved me. And they want to kind of get that back. And it's kind of I think one of the sneakier ways, one of the kind of less recognized ways to start that control and manipulation.
Yeah, that's what they want, the person that was there. They know they're there. Maybe they were sick or they didn't feel good. You know, they had a rough day, rough week at work.
Or maybe
know.
you did something to change them. He
Yeah,
was just
maybe.
fine when I met him in the beginning,
Yeah.
and then after being with me for a little while, like, this
Well,
is,
Yeah,
you
you gotta
know.
take that blame on
Yeah.
yourself, don't you? Yeah, that's part of that self-confidence
Absolutely.
going down where you.
Yeah, he
you
said
internalize.
that I couldn't cook supper and I didn't burn the steak or whatever, you know, so it was your fault that he's acting that way, you know.
I think it's a lot of extremes. Just to play off of that example, I burned the steak, therefore I'm a terrible cook. Well, that's a pretty large leap. You know, it could be I burned the steak because my phone rang and a kid yelled, and I had 6 other things going on at the same time and lost track of what I was doing. Not that I'm a bad cook, but just that circumstances that might happen. But it's those extremes that we're looking at as red flag behaviors, that you did this one small thing, and now we're going to make this broad generalization about your character or your competency based on this one thing that happened. And I think that's another really good red flag to look for, is probably blowing things out of proportion and making character judgments based on, you know, what are probably minor mistakes.
Yeah. But he's confirming it though, because he's saying, you know, I keep saying he, it could be she, but they're saying that, yeah, you did burn the steak. See, I told you you couldn't cook, you know.
Yeah.
Even though there are 5 or 6 things going on that is the cause of it, he's confirming that yes, you can. Yeah. So definitely. So what do we want to talk about next?
I actually have, oh, you, go ahead. Okay. As a parent of young adults, what are things that we can actually teach our children or kind of help cue into some of those red flags that, you know, will kind of help? I don't even know how to really explain it, but a lot of with the social media and stuff, these kids are in love with somebody, you know, 3 countries away, they've never met. But what are things that we can kind of just guide our children to know what's the right behavior and what's not, and how to identify some of those initial abusive ones, because it's not always fist.
Right, right. And it's hard to tell because when you meet someone, there's always, if they're abusive or not abusive, it's always, you know, lollipops and butterflies and bubbles and all that. You know, there's always that good. But with an abuser, they're going to be a little bit more on the extreme side. They're going to want a little bit more, like they're going to want more time with them. They're going to be buying them flowers, you know, where a normal person would not go that extreme with things because they want to win them over. Because with an abusive situation, remember it's a power thing. So when you're in love with someone, you're kind of submissive because you're giving into them because you love them. It's supposed to be 2 people coming together. But in an abusive situation, one person is coming together, the other one's going on top because they want the power over them. So if you see that going on, you know, if they seem to be giving and the other person's like doing more power plays, you know, like they do one up on them, you know, like they have to, you know, like if they go out to eat or something like that, they'll have them wear certain clothes, or they won't let them go with their friend, like they don't want Susie to go with them, they don't want a double date, you know, like I wanted my friend and her boyfriend to come with us and he won't let that happen. Things like that, where they're not inclusive, you know, where they want to separate them, and, you know, if they put, like they won't let me wear blue jeans, or I had one girl that they couldn't wear pajamas outside the bedroom. You know, if they, you know, have weird kind of controlling type behaviors, you know, because they should be equal. In a non-abusive relationship, everything's equal. But in an abusive relationship, someone's putting restrictions on the other person. You should be able to be who you are in an equal relationship. If you want to wear pajamas outside your bedroom, you should be able to. But in an abusive relationship, they won't let you wear a yellow shirt. Don't ask me
I
why.
think also examples of healthy relationships for our kids, I think that is a big key. So that they see what a healthy relationship like.
And I don't even have kids. But my mom, like, as many crappy boyfriends as I dated, you know, the one thing I do know is she wasn't really, it was like, oh, I know that person's bad for you, but like, she would build me up. She wouldn't talk about how bad this person was for me, and like, you know, oh, you shouldn't be doing that because, you know, this is wrong, because you're a kid, you're going to be like, oh, mom says it's wrong, I'm going to do it, you know. And, you know, but she would always tell me, like, you know, you're independent, you're strong, like, look what you're doing, look where you want to go, like, you can do this, you know. And she would just build me up. And you know, I've had friends that have been in abusive situations, and like just doing that, like seeing them, like reminding them, like I'm here for you, and you know, this is who I see, like this is why, you know, just building them up, building that confidence back up, so that they can be like, oh yeah, you know, and be like, then they realize like, oh, this is who I am. This is, you know, this
That's
person
a really
doesn't.
good point.
Yeah, that's excellent. You know,
Yeah.
it's because you don't hear that a lot. Like that, you know, you'll hear like the parents are like, no, you're not going, and of course, yeah,
I'm going.
I'm going.
I'm going.
You know?
You might not know that I'm going, but I'm going.
And I think maybe you need to back that up. So I love it that you brought that up, because that's where I was
Yeah.
going to go with that answer is building up the kids' confidence and self-esteem so that they know who they are and they can't be fooled into thinking that they're not. And I'm going to back that up even a step further and say, as a parent or guardian, having that quality within yourself and that ability to, you know, if you don't have that self-esteem and if you're not assured of who you are and your capabilities and your worth, like your core worth, everybody has worth and value in this world. And if you yourself as a parent do not know that, you are going to struggle to pass that on and teach that to your children. So as a parent, if you need to build that up within yourself, reach out and find that help. Seek a therapist that can help, a support group, something to put that, to start layering that in yourself so that you can then pass it on to your kids, and you're breaking cycles if there is one in your life of abuse, so that that stops with you. And then if there's not that cycle there, that you're ensuring it's not starting up with the next generation, and that your kids are going to see you being confident and healthy, and they're gonna get that from you because they're watching everything we do, right? They're
Yes,
learning,
they are.
Yeah, they're learning everything from us. So I would back that up even just a step further and say parents need to have that focus on themselves so that they can instill that in their children.
I mean, it falls to everybody too, like, you know, whether your daughter is, you know, 15 versus 30, or, you know, whether your friend, you know, just got involved with a crappy guy that you really don't like, no matter who it is and like who you see is going through it, do not leave them. You know, you've got to be there because they need stability, and if, you know, if you can be that stability, be it, because.
Well, and I think you just made like such an excellent point, was if you're building them up while he's busy trying to tear her down,
Right.
but you're constantly building her up, so you're at war with him and he don't even realize it.
Right. But I think
That's
you're
pretty awesome.
you know, like that person that compliments you all the time versus the one that says, you know,
Yeah.
all these negative things. So, yeah, it's a good thing.
That was good. Great. So what do you want to talk about next? I'm so proud of you ladies for coming tonight. Thank you so much. This is a very tough topic.
Yes.
You know, and like I said, the reason that I wanted to have this is that abuse doesn't have to be, you know, the black eye thing, that we can start with the lower, you know, how it starts and things like that. So
Maybe we should kind of like look at some of the legal stuff, because that is a problem that I come into. You know, I reach out to these people and they're like, "Oh, you're at the sheriff's office," and I'm like, "Yeah, I'm just here, but I work with, you know, this company, and like I'm here if you need anything. I'm just resources, you know." And they don't realize that that I'm not just, you know, a police officer trying to like, you know, trying to get a statement or trying to get them to, you know, tell me more about the situation or tell them that I don't believe them, you know. I think that getting it out there that not all police officers are crappy. You know, I work there, I hear some of the things they say, but there are some that come to me and they're like, hey, like, this person seems like they're in a bad situation, like, I think that they're in dangerous, you know, they're in a dangerous place, can you help them? Because, like, I want to help them. And you see some of that, and I want people to know that it's not all scary if you make a report, it's not all scary if you go to a police station, you know, for a cop, or if the cop doesn't arrest that person that night that the incident happened. It's, you know, keep doing it, you know, keep getting involved, because that's important. I always say, like I said earlier, paper trails are the best type of evidence to have. But I just, you know, I want people not to be afraid to go there to make reports, because it's important.
So Taylor, if you're in a violent situation and you're told that you ought to get a restraining order, what do you do?
So I'll get reports in and everything, and I'll reach out to these victims, and if I have somebody that's like, yes, this was really bad, like, I really don't know what to do, I'm like, well, okay, are you in a safe place? And I'm like, have you thought about a restraining order? Like, do you fear for your safety? And if they're like, yeah, like, I don't know what this person's capable of, and I'll be like, all right, when is the time we can meet up? Because I have that paperwork, and I can sit with them, and I can run through this paperwork and say, this is what, this is where you fill this out, this is what you need to do here. I'll be here if you have questions. They have to fill out that huge pack of, paper and write down everything that happened. But then we'll take it over to the courthouse together. We'll get that court date together, and I will be there in that courtroom with them, supporting them as, they explain what happened. So I am that, that stability board there, absolutely they can have whoever they want with them, but essentially it's me.
So a huge pack of paper. What in the heck are they going to ask me to fill out?
A lot of basic information, a lot of information about you. So you would be the petitioner, and then whoever you're filing against would be the respondent. So it's a lot of your information and their information. A lot of it is filling out what they've done, and then what you don't want them to do. So check mark all those nice little boxes. And then in the back is probably the hardest part. It's called our memo part, where you have to literally write everything that's happened. And we ask that you start with the most recent event, and then you go backwards. So you start with, oh, yesterday they did this, but then, 2 days before that they did this, and this has been going on, for so long. Because the judge reads that part, and they decide, okay, this is, serious enough case, that I want to take it to court. So that's the big part of it. It's not too crazy, but it is a lot of information, and sometimes it is mentally draining to fill that.
Because it's emotional.
Yes, and it's writing down everything that happened, that something you've already been through, probably multiple times. So.
And it's upsetting to live it, and then you have to kind of relive it when you write it down.
Mm-hmm. That's why I like to meet with them. Sometimes I'll give them paperwork and take it wherever you want, but I like them to come, talk to me first, sit down with me, because most of the time they're comfortable enough to fill out that paperwork with me there. And so we can walk it over, and, they can come back with me, I'm still there.
So the first time that you go to the court with the paperwork that you fill out the first time, what's the ex parte, what's the first paperwork?
Yeah, so when you turn that paperwork in, there's actually 3 things that can happen to it. First of all, it can be dismissed. The judge can be like, no, I don't want to take this. Second of all, you can get a court date, which is just a court date. You just have to wait till that court date to get the full restraining order. And then you can get an ex parte, which is a temporary restraining order before your court date. And then when you go to the court date, then you can get the full order. So yeah, it's a little bit of a process.
So what's the difference between an ex parte and a full order of protection?
So that ex parte is like temporary. It's just for right now until you get to that court date. And then that court date will determine whether or not you get a full year. Very rarely, it's, lifetime restraining orders. And then you could get it dismissed that day as well if things are going right.
So like an ex parte would hold you until you get a court date for the full order?
Right. Yeah, it would hold you. So like if you were living with that abuser, and you're like, I'm here, I want to get this restraining order, then, you can go home and call an officer out there and get that person served. They're out of that house that day, the same day you file. So that ex parte is very important to have. If, in some cases you don't get the ex parte and you get a court date, then we're going to look at places to go.
So the ex parte will say things like, your abuser has to stay away from you.
Yep.
And the ex parte can say they can't live in the house with you anymore. And it can say things like things that you can have out of the house. Say you want to go and live with your girlfriend. Right. But it'll say things that you can take with you from the house.
Absolutely.
Like the police can come and you can get your clothes and your dog and whatever is stated in the ex parte, that you can take that with you to your girlfriend's house or wherever you're staying.
Right, yeah, there's a very specific spot that actually says, like, the respondent cannot sell, damage, like any of this certain property that you list. And if they do, that's a violation of that order of protection. And in Jefferson County, our judges really don't like when people mess with their orders. So, and then, yes, on the order, you check mark everything that you don't want this respondent to do. So that's committing or threatening to commit any domestic violence, sexual assault, disturbing the peace of the petitioner. There's a spot where you put down your address, where you put your employer information, where you put if you go to school, and also that you don't want the respondent to communicate with you through any manner or any medium. And some people don't understand that, but that also means like through any third party. So, you know, if I told her to tell you this, and we had a restraining order, I'd be violating it because I'm still trying to get into contact with you.
What about kids?
So there is a spot, so say we have kids that are mutual, I can file for custody in that order of protection. And then I can also ask for child support and maintenance and anything like that. Sometimes the judge will do that, sometimes he won't. Sometimes you have to go through, you know, civil court, family court for custody. But you can also file for child protection orders if you feel like your children are in danger. And same thing goes for them.
So if I do an ex parte, the judge can say that I can keep the kids, or he can keep the kids until the full order of protection.
Absolutely.
Date.
Yep, and he can also set up an app called Talking Parents, where the petitioner and the respondent can communicate between each other about the children, and if they communicate, if they try to like start harassing you or something like that, the judge can actually see those text messages.
I don't mean to interject. I know that Ms. Brett has a long drive home.
Oh, yes.
So thank you very
Thank
much.
you guys so much for having me.
She's got 4 kids at home waiting.
Oh, yes.
Thank you for coming.
Bye, thank you so much for having me.
And then there were 4. That's a lot of legal stuff, huh?
It is, yes, but I know it sounds crazy, it really does, but it's not. It's just a little bit of a process, and it's hard sometimes too. Like I said, like sometimes that psychological and mental abuse is still continuing while they're in this process of doing all that. So that's why all the support is very beneficial.
And I like that you touched on having kids, with the ex partes but what if the judge denies it? So how do they get the visitations to the petition or the defendant against the restraining order?
So normally what happens if like a judge is like, no, I'm not going to issue custody, you both can keep 50-50, because unfortunately, in some cases, like Missouri is a father state, which means most of the time if you ask for custody, it's going to go 50-50 either way. But if he doesn't say, oh, no custody, but we'll figure out visitation rights, or if he's like, I don't even want to mess with it, go through family court. You got to go through a divorce attorney, or you got to go through custody or anything like that. He can do that as well, especially if there's already a custody order in place and you ask for custody. He's not going to overstep another judge's, rules. So.
And then I think for safety concerns, exchanging children at the police station somewhere very public, and making sure that that abuser is not using that as another chance to get you alone so that they can perpetrate more abuse against you, that you're picking those very public, I wouldn't even say public places, because a grocery store, shopping mall, parking lot isn't really going to be good enough. Going to your local police station and asking maybe even for an officer assist, can someone come out with me while we exchange these kiddos back and forth? And having that extra layer of accountability there for your abuser, so that you're exchanging in as safe a manner as you can.
In some instances, you can put on there like who you want to be in that exchange. So if you don't want him to come pick up those kids, if you want the mother-in-law or the sister, then that person has to come pick up those kids up, and if that respondent shows up, he's violating that order of protection.
Yeah, if you want something like that, though, it has to be specified.
It has to be specified in that court order. Yeah.
So if you're leaving an abuser that you think is abusive, of course, can you have that written, or how do you protect your kids if you feel like they're abusive? If that's why you're leaving them. How do you protect your kids? Do you keep the kids if it's not addressed in the ex parte? Or how do you do the custody with your children if you think that he's going to abuse them? If it's not written.
Yeah, I mean, if you feel like the respondent's going to hurt those children, then definitely try for a child restraining order. If not, if there's no custody order in place, you don't have to give your kids to one another. But if they do go to family court and file for custody, then you're going to have to do that battle. But there's nothing saying like you have to give me my kids or anything like that until there's a court order in place.
So if you think that they're gonna abuse them, then if you keep them, that's okay, not to let the other person have them.
Right, yeah, I mean,
Parent.
especially in a marriage, and especially if they're not the respondent's children, they have no rights to the kiddo. In a marriage, there's nothing saying that, I have to give you my kids because you asked for them until there's a court order, especially, if that petitioner is going into a shelter or anything like that.
So will the court look poorly on that if you keep the kids to yourself and you separate them from the other parent?
It kind of depends on the situation. I mean, if you have specific reason, like I fear for my children's safety, that's why I don't keep them. You need to make sure you tell like a lawyer, put it in the restraining order. Yeah, make sure you reiterate that.
Because
I think probably it's a case that bad enough, you're already looking for a child order of protection, and you're going down those avenues.
so when you get your ex parte, when you get one for you to protect you, you can also request one for your children at the exact same time.
Yeah, and you can get one even without getting one for yourself. You can just get one for your kiddos.
Okay.
If you don't get one for your kiddos, but you have one for yourself, they are still protected when they're around you.
I run in that sometimes with them. They don't want to give up their kids, and I'm like, gotta watch out for that.
Definitely getting on top of that, and being the first one to file for custody, or you put the ground rules for visitation on there.
Okay, sounds good. We're learning a lot tonight. So they have the Sexual Assault Summit in October with the Missouri Coalition Against Domestic and Sexual Violence. Taylor and I both attended that. One thing that I really liked was it's not an app, it's a website where if you're sexually assaulted, you can go on this website and it takes you step by step through questions. And it's like the best law enforcement officer, advocate, and SANE, which is a sexual assault nurse examiner. It would be like having all three of them, the best one, answering all these questions. So do you want to talk about that at all?
Yeah, I mean, from what I got there, basically it's a bunch of questions that you answer, and this is, you fill out all these questions, and then this is what you can bring into a police station to like make a report. And you give them this paper and be like, I've written this, can you go off of some of what I've said, instead of them having to actually speak to a person about what's been going on again, after writing it down. So it just makes it a little bit easier, that police report process, a little bit easier on the victim.
Yeah, you can go through at your own speed. You can answer as many questions as you want at any given time. You can stop it. You can print it. It's a PDF form, so you can do it in stages or whatever. And then you can email it to yourself. You can save a PDF. You can email it to the prosecutor, to law enforcement, to your sister, to anybody you want. But then once you get off that website, it's gone. So nobody else will see it. So I thought that was really neat that they did that. So there's a new Bill of Rights. I've got it in my thing, but I don't have it with me. But there's a new Bill of Rights for sexual assault victims in Missouri, which is awesome.
Yeah.
And it offers, off the top of my head, it offers things that are really basic, like a change of clothes in a shower, which is very basic. But right now, before the first of the year, sometimes when we had sexual assault victims, they would go to a shelter in a paper gown because they don't have a change of clothes. And it's really sad, but now that we have this Bill of Rights, it's awesome. They get to pick the language of their examiner and of the law enforcement, which isn't that awesome that you can understand the law enforcement officer?
Yes.
I mean, right now, until the first of the year, they can have someone who doesn't even speak their language interview them. So, I mean, basic things like that, and I just think it's an awesome law that's going to start January 1st. Let's see, what else I want to talk about?
I should probably mention something else about the restraining order before we get off the topic. If you file for a restraining order and you turn it in and it gets dismissed, the respondent is not going to know that you tried.
Oh, okay.
So they won't be notified that you tried. They're only going to be notified if they are served with papers that you did get, a restraining, like an ex parte or a court date. But I know that some people are really afraid to even go try, because what if it's dismissed and they are notified that you tried? They won't know.
Yeah, the intimidation is really,
Right.
it's a real blockage for for victims to get help, the fear of them finding out.
So the respondent doesn't have to show up to court?
Yes, that's, so when a respondent is served, they have, the same rights as the petitioner to show up, to explain their side of everything, basically to defend themselves. They don't have to show up. And, in that case, then you are more likely to get that restraining order because there's no one, contesting to what you say. If they do show up, yes, you get to tell your side, but yes, you have to listen to them tell the judge their side. Sometimes, it's better to have some legal attorneys. Sometimes that attorney can speak for you, so you don't have to go in there and face this person again.
Is there free legal help to some of these domestic violence?
Yeah, going back to the resources that are available, there is a wide variety of resources that specify in domestic and sexual violence, and normally they are either low income or free services.
So when you apply for the ex parte, you would go in by yourself and apply for it. The respondent, the abuser, doesn't show up for that. But whenever you have the court date for the full order of protection, that's when the respondent, the abuser, and the victim would both show up.
Right.
And then that's when they both say their story to the judge, and that's when the judge would determine if they get the full order of protection, and then he would determine the length of time that it would last. Which it used to be a year all the time, basically, but they can go to lifetime, which you really don't see. But
Very
they can,
rarely.
yeah, they can adjust the number of years is up to the judge, but it used to always be a year.
Yeah,
But
they've
now
adjusted, now there's a couple, you can get 2 or 5 years.
Yeah,
I can
yeah.
definitely see that.
So can they go back in and reapply for?
So there's actually now on the restraining orders, there's a little box that, basically says that if you were to get the full year of an order of protection, right now, next year at this time, it would be automatically renewed instead of you having to go back in and file this all again. It only does it for 1 more year. After that extra year, if things are continuing, more than likely the judge is going to give you lifetime.
Okay. That's good to know.
So, let's see. Whenever you get a new client and they come into the shelter, what are some steps that you take with them as far as legal aid and things that you help them step through?
Yeah, so when a resident first comes into the shelter, after an intake where we're kind of gathering basic information from them, we typically give them a couple of days to settle in, get to know the advocates that are working there and the residents that are already living there. And then we're connecting them with an advocate who works with them to identify goals. What do we need to start getting done to get your life back together? Do we need documents like birth certificates and social security cards? Do you have past due bills out there that we need to address? Are there landlords where you have evictions and we need to communicate with that landlord and let them know that this was because of domestic violence, so that we can get it off your record so that it's not held against you when you're trying to move out into your own place? What are those things that we need to do to help you kind of start from scratch and build your life back up? And so while they're working with that coordinator, that advocate, we're also getting them set up with therapy services. We're getting them into our support groups so they can start learning how to not just do the practical things to rebuild our lives, but how are we rebuilding your self-esteem? How are we getting you your confidence back? How are we convincing you that you are a worthy person and you do deserve happiness? And then we are also setting them up with some educational aspects of those groups where we're talking about how do we break the cycle of violence, how do we recognize red flags in the next relationship you're going to get into, and really trying to pull in that prevention piece with them, and so that when they leave us, because they're moving into their forever home, a strong, confident, healthy, happy person, that we know that they're putting their best foot forward. And then after they leave us, we keep up with them. They're still invited to come back for support groups, any extracurricular activities we have, we invite them to come back. And then we make phone calls to check in with them and just kind of see how things are going, where their lives are. If they've got kiddos, how are the kids doing? Fill us in on what's going on with them. And, so we're kind of continuing that advocacy for a time after they leave us even.
Yeah. That sounds good. The aftercare is really important Because what I see is even they might work with you for 6 months or a year or 2 years, and then you might not hear from them for 6 months, a year, or 2 years, and then they pop right back up. And it might be with the original abuser, or it might be another abuser. You know, it's like that couch theory. They're more comfortable with an abuser because that's what they're used to. And as they break free, the more they heal, the more they get with a healthier relationship. So,
And if you can maintain that contact after they've left the shelter environment, and you're that constant reminder to them that, oh yeah, there's this group of advocates that taught me I'm strong, I'm smart, I'm capable, I'm confident, that's gonna just deepen that internalized message. And you know, with you keeping up with them, hopefully they're gonna be less likely to step back into that cycle. And if they do, then we're there to catch it pretty quickly, you know, when we're calling and doing our check-ins. So
yeah, and having that good relationship with them where they know they can call you and they know that they can say, you know, hey, I went back with him, and they can freely talk with you about going back with their abuser, and they know that you're not going to judge them because you understand that that's part of the process. So I think it's important for them to know that you're not judging them, that they can be honest with you, and you acknowledge that that is part of the process, that it's going to take time for them to heal to get to where they can live in a healthy, violent-free life. So, yeah.
Are there job skills that they can attain throughout being in the state house? Say, stay-at-home mom has never worked since in her adult life.
yeah, I think that there are plenty of skills you can pick up in the shelter that would apply to the job force. You have to think you are going from probably living as a single unit family with maybe mom and dad and kids, and now you're living in a shelter with however many, 5 to 30 other women and their kids. So you're going to be learning things like conflict management, you're going to be learning things like emotional regulation skills, and all of that is going to come in handy when you're on the job. If you've got an angry customer in front of you, you've got those skills now for how to manage a conflict, how to communicate effectively without pouring a bunch of emotion into it, and staying calm and cool and collected, and how to work together as a team, because you're in a shelter with all these other families. You all better learn how to work out the details and work together. So that's going to translate well into working as part of a team on a job. So we can take just about anything and make it into like a life skills lesson, and how that applies to making your life better. Yeah, for sure.
Something else with getting employment, sometimes they get, when you're a domestic violence victim, you have a lot of PTSD is not common to experience, and Voc Rehab sometimes plays into that. And if you get evaluated by your doctor or whatever, and they determine that you do have PTSD or something down those lines, you might qualify for Voc Rehab. And then you can get training depending on the level of disability, anxiety, depression, anything like that plays into it. You could qualify for educational credits and things where you could go to college or training, and then you could end up being able to make more money after you get educated and be able to support yourself and your children better. And then there are supports in there to help you get through that college time, because if you're going to college, of course, you're not working. And then if you have kids, but there are supports to get you through that time. And so then that makes you more financially stable to raise your children as a single parent. So even though you kind of get a monkey wrench thrown in there because you're a domestic violence survivor, there are safeguards in there, like Voc Rehab, that can make you more financially independent. What's the average stay at your shelter?
It really depends on the resident, and kind of where they're at in their life, and what resources they have outside of us. I will say that the housing everywhere right now is difficult. It's expensive, and there's not a lot out there, especially for a low-income family or someone on like a HUD voucher or something like that. So length of stay kind of depends on how they work through the program. So our shelter is a goal-based program. We really want you to be working through weekly identifying goals and then actively working towards meeting those goals. And that's all things to further yourself, like, finding a job, working on your confidence, like all of those skills that we need to be successful. And if you're working through through those goals that you're setting, you know, you're probably not going to be with us for very long. I would say average stay probably like 3 to 8 months. I mean, it really just depends on what the housing is like and how they're moving through housing lists and things like that. That's the biggest barrier. Housing and transportation are the two things that are really stand in someone's way of making some fantastic progress.
So if we come and stay at your shelter, we can't sit on the couch and eat bonbons?
I mean, wouldn't that be lovely? Yes,
The first 2 days.
absolutely. Yes, I will absolutely sign up for that for the first couple of days. I want to. I tell all of our new residents that come in, like, take a breath and just relax for a couple of days. Get your feet underneath of you, figure out the lay of the house, meet everybody who's here, and just let's not be critical thinkers for a day or two. You know, we can start fresh on Monday morning. We'll hit the ground running. We'll start talking about some goals, and we'll start talking about what we need to do to kind of move you forward. But let's just take a minute to just be in the moment, be grateful that we're safe, and just take a breath. And then, you know, depending on when they come in, I mean, usually Monday morning we're talking about, like, all right, let's sit down now and figure out what we need to do to move forward and to really help you. And, you know, what your goals are, what do you want to work towards, and you know, how can we get there together?
Yeah, when they come to a shelter type situation, things are so crazy. Sometimes they don't even know their own name. You just can't even focus on anything. You just have, like you said, you have to take a deep breath because things happen so fast and so many things happen, and it just kind of snowballed before they did call to get into your shelter. So it does take a couple of days to kind of process what did happen.
And give them that time to kind of work through those emotions and get settled.
Right. Yeah, in St. Genevieve, whenever we get domestic violence call, we always make sure that they're safe, and we start with the safety plan, and we start with goals, but we always give them a thick notebook that has a folder in it, and then they can write down things that happen. They can write down what's happening now, appointments that they have, that they're scheduling, and then they can also write down things that happen as they remember them. So we give them a big fat notebook. And because it's easy to forget things with everything going on and to keep things straight. So I think it's really important that they write things down. And also whenever you journal, that's one way to say what you're journaling, they can go back and look and see how far they've come. So they can go back and read those original documentation. So that's a healing tool too. So all that's good that they write those things down because it's so chaotic when all that's happening. And documentation, we didn't even talk about documentation, girls. But documenting things that happen. Things, we didn't talk about stalking at all either. But if there's any stalking where you think they're watching you or they're following you, if they go to activities that you go to, like if we're at the community center, if you're at the community center routinely and you notice that they're in the parking lot when you come and go or things like that, if they use that notebook and they can write down those things, you know, and then they can, and taking pictures, like if you notice they're watching you go in and out of the grocery store, you can take a picture of them in their vehicle, things like that, so that you can document what's going on, you know, because it's that intimidation factor. That's what stalking is intimidating. Yeah. So yeah, if they document all those things, all that is important. So that's some of the things that we offer. Anyway, we're just about out of time. If you guys have any closing comments or anything?
I think maybe a good thing to end with is we're coming up on the holiday season. It's a high stress time for a lot of us, right? So we see a little bit of a rise in phone calls around this time of year. So, you know, just want to put it out there that if you're feeling any kind of overwhelmed or wondering if maybe your relationship isn't the healthiest, advocates are waiting to answer phone calls. And even if it's just that you want to be like, hey, I don't know about this. Maybe I'm crazy. Can you tell me if this is this normal or not? You know, we're happy to talk through things like that with you. And then for family and loved ones, if you have that person in your family or your circle that you think might be experiencing some form of abuse, maybe just a quiet reassurance for them that, hey, I see you, and when you're ready to talk, I'm here. And I'll be that constant, steady person, and then stick around, and be there for the process for them, so that you know they have a safe place to land, and someone who's not going to be worn out with you know whatever your path is going to turn out to be. And then family and loved ones also more than welcome to call the shelter hotline and get information. We have people that call in and say, you know, I've got a sister who I think something's going on. How do I help her? We're happy to talk through those things. So the shelter hotline is for everybody for information and education and referrals. So please don't hesitate to reach out, and we're happy to provide that information.
I know what I had a question about. What if you're not bad enough to call a hotline? If your situation is not bad enough?
If your situation
Is not bad enough?
I mean, if someone were to say that to me on the phone, I'm gonna maybe gently question, like, well, what's bad enough? Like, why do we want to wait for it to get to that point? The longer you wait, the more difficult it's going to be for you to get yourself out of that cycle. So bad enough. I mean, I work in the industry, so for me, any abuse is bad enough. If it's a pattern of your partner talking down to you all the time and that's all they ever do, is that bad enough? Well, yes, because you deserve more than to be talked down to all the time. You have worth as a human being, and your worth is more than being talked to however that person wants to talk. So bad enough for me, like, there is no benchmark bad enough. This is one I should call. It's when you notice the pattern, when you become aware of it. That's when you need to start reaching out, right? Because you can't, before you're aware, you don't know. But so when you become aware, start reaching out, start talking to people. And that doesn't mean that you have to leave right away. If you're not ready, that's okay. That's part of that autonomy we want to foster in our victims. But there's nothing wrong with getting information. There's nothing wrong with having that one person in your life where you can go to and say, hey, this happened the other day, and this is what I saw happening, but this is what they said happened. Am I crazy? Is you know, kind of having that sounding board with someone so that you can come to that realization maybe a little bit quicker. But I cringe at the term bad enough because I mean, all abuse is bad enough.
Yeah. It's like that gut feeling, when you just got that feeling that it just doesn't sit right the way they talk to you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Sounds good. Kayla, do you have any finishing?
I think I talked enough.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Yes, you gave us a lot of good information. Misty, do you have anything?
I'm so glad that this has been brought to the attention of our community. It's not talked about enough. We all know of somebody or have lost somebody to domestic violence. Sorry, I get a little choked up by this. So please talk about it. Talk about it with your kids and be the steady person in somebody's life.
Thanks, Misty.
Sorry, a little emotional.
It's a tough topic, but
is.
it's good that we talk about it, and I do hope people watch the video, you know, and just kind of think about that these things do happen, and it's normal to have some conflict and things, but the power and control is what makes it an abusive type situation. And abuse doesn't have to be horrible. You know, if we stop it when it starts, it's fine, identifying it, and you don't have to consider yourself a victim, you know, that's a label. You can just stop it when it starts, or even if it is worse, don't think of the label. Just think of yourself, and you deserve better. You deserve to be happy and healthy. You know, you deserve more. You're worthy. You know.
Yeah.
So don't think of the label. Just think of yourself. And
Said no harm.
and if you don't feel like you are important, you need to talk to somebody, because I guarantee you, somebody out there knows you're important and you are worthy.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you very much,
Thank you,
everybody,
guys.
for coming.
Thank you.